Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. The webinar of today will talk about the HAS assessment, and more in particular, it will give you an update on the HAS assessment system. As usual, you will be muted during the presentations, but you have the possibility to use the Q&A panel for entering your questions. My colleagues Gonzalo and Nuno will be having a look at your questions as much as possible and provide you with a written answer or an oral answer during the presentations. As usual, should that not be the case today, please don't worry, because we intend to make the Q&A report available via the website again. The presentation is recorded also, so you will be provided with the complete recording as well as the PPT of today. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor on to my colleagues Gonzalo and Nuno for the presentation. But before we do so, we would like to launch a small poll before we start, because we would like to know two things. First of all, how familiar are you with the topic presented today? How familiar are you with the HAS assessment system? And secondly, what is the impact of the non-citation, if any, on your work? So please take a moment to reply those two questions in the poll. And after a while, we'll then share with you the results so that we have an idea. So thanks in advance for doing so. I see that people are bit by bit participating to the poll. And we also noted that most of you are quite familiar with the HAS system. So very good. Let's hope that this webinar will update you well, and that you might learn new things today. If you're not familiar at all, this is the moment you will probably become so. And many of you also, 65% indicate that the impact of non-citation is high on your work. So I see the results are quite stable. Let me close the poll and share with the audience right away. There we go. So I don't know, Nuno and Gonzalo, the floor is yours if you want to comment on this result and then kick off with the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to see that most of the participants are familiar with the topic. I would suggest to kick off the presentation. So the goal of this presentation is really to give you an update on the current contract for the HAS system. We're going to talk about the gap between contracts and what are the options on the table to deal with the situation. And we're going to give you an update as well on the new contract that is coming very soon. On this slide, you have some background information as a reminder. So the HAS contractor is Ernst & Young, and the contract started on the 1st of 2022, so it will end very soon. I can also say that the HAS contract ran quite smoothly until February 2021 with no major issues. Then in March 2021, the European Commission informed us that the meetings between the HAS consultants and the TCs were stopped. And as you know, meetings between the HAS consultants and the TCs are really important following a lack of compliance assessment in order to clarify the comments received from the HAS consultant and then agree on a way forward in order to solve that assessment. Then the situation got a little bit more complicated. In October 2021, the Commission informed us that they have to reduce the number of HAS assessments to being processed, and this was related again with issues with the HAS budget. On a weekly basis, the Commission started to prioritize formal votes and publication assessments in coordination with the European Commission sectoral desk officers, and these resulted in really many requests that were not processed, they were put on hold, particularly first working draft assessments, but also inquiry assessments. The main reasons for these budget issues are related to the introduction or the inclusion of new sectors in the system, like fertilizers and explosives, And these new sectors were not initially foreseen in the HAS contract at the beginning on the contract when the HAS budget was being defined. And then these sectors had a big volume of standards to be assessed. And there were also some issues related to the management of the consultants, among other issues. So where are we now? Somewhere in the middle of February, the Commission informed us that a last batch of assessments requests were allocated to the HAS consultants on the 4th of February. And as of that date onwards, CEN and CENELEC can no longer request HAS assessments within the current contract. So this means that the HAS budget is over. There is no more money to request assessments. As you can see here on the slides, there are 76 requests that were not assessment requests that were not handled by Ernst & Young because of budget issues. And what is important is once the new HAS assessment system is in place, once the system is restored, it's very important to follow up those assessments not handled and see whether it makes sense to if they need to be requested again for assessment for that particular stage, or if it does not make sense anymore because the draft standard has moved from one standardization, from one stage of the standardization process to another stage. As you can see on the slide, there were some sectors impacted, some heavily. For example, there were 32 standards out of 76 under the Machinery Directive to which did not receive HAS assessments because of issues with the budget. There were 15 standards in support of LVD to which did not receive also an assessment. There were 5 for recreational crafts. There were 4 for medical devices. There were other sectors as well impacted, but with a less volume of standards that were not assessed. So as I said, it is very important to follow up once on those requests, once the new system is in place. In terms of the status, of course, we are still waiting for 3 HAS assessment reports. These will be the last ones that are still pending, but will come soon because yeah, we were informed by Ernst & Young that these are the last ones, and we are expecting to receive them before the closure of the contract, which is by the end of this month. In terms of time frame of the current contract and the new contract, we are right now in the gray area in the middle of this of the slide, as you can see. So this means that we are in between contracts, and this obviously means, as I just explained, that HAS assessments are not possible now. On the right side, you can see that the start of the new contract should take place somewhere between the 1st of April and the 15th of May. And these are, or this is a theoretical period to which is mentioned in the new tender specification. And as you can, and obviously, once the new contract is in place, this means that HAS assessments can be requested again. But it is also very important to look at the backlog of those pending assessments and see whether they need to be requested again or not. CCMC PM can provide you some support on that too. So what do we do now? So we agreed internally that CCMC will continue to request inquiry and formal vote HAS assessment via the HAS platform on LiveLink. But this will be some sort of fake request or empty request. We know that we will not receive any HAS assessment report back, but for traceability purposes, we came to the conclusion that this is the best way to track the assessments and then to perform some follow-up actions on those standards that normally would receive an inquiry or formal vote assessment. So in this way, it's very easy for us to retrieve the lists to perform some follow-up actions. As an interim solution, we have agreed with the European Commission that the Commission desk officers might provide some sort of feedback or assessment on those harmonized standards that would be reaching inquiry and formal vote stage, and to which because there is no budget with with a HAS assessment, they cannot receive an assessment. So this means that in practice, we will provide the list of those draft standards during this period in between contracts to the European Commission. We will ask the European Commission desk officers whether they would agree in assessing those standards. If the Commission replies positively, this means that we will ask the technical committees to complete this European Commission checklist. You can see it, you can see a print screen on the right side of the slide. And this will help the European Commission in the evaluation of their assessment. So this was a request from the Commission that is important for the technical committees to perform some sort of self-assessment to assist the Commission in their evaluation. I don't know if this process will work for all sectors. Maybe it will work for some sectors and not for for others. We need to see. And if you need some support to better explain how this system, how this procedure will take place, I would advise you to contact the CCMC project manager in charge of the technical committee. So right now, Gonçalo will continue the presentation, and it will give you some options on how to deal with the situation in between contracts. So Gonçalo, you can take over the presentation.
Thanks, Nuno. So I've seen already a few questions related to this topic. You know, what can we do and what will be done, and what CCMC will do to support the next phase. And I will try to guide you in the coming slides. What are, you know, the main recommendations at the moment, and what are the options we have at our hands? First of all, as well, I would like to apologize for my voice. I hope it will be understandable, and, you know, I'll try to go slowly so that you can easily understand my words. So the first option and the first case we have on our side is related to the requests for first working draft or CD as assessments whenever we are, you know, in a parallel project. So at the moment, as Nuno informed, we have no way to get an assessment back. So the main recommendation at the moment is we will inform the technical bodies, and, you know, also through today's webinar, we are giving you this information. You know, we should not ask as assessments for first working drafts, and we should continue the technical work. And when the system is reestablished, you will be informed, and then we can take a decision to re-ask at that moment in time. And or if you have moved on into the inquiry, then, you know, we will have an assessment at the inquiry phase. So this would be the first message. Then we are going through the inquiry process, you know, or whenever we are through the parallel work with ISO or with IEC. In a way, at the moment, in this process, we will not fundamentally change. The only difference is that, of course, at the moment, we don't have any assessment received at the moment. But what we will do is, you know, we will continue the process, you know, for the homegrown work, you know, the work developed at European level, we will request as assessment for traceability. For parallel process, we will follow exactly the same steps. You know, if you are under the Vienna agreement, we will also request as assessment, you know, in the AS platform, just for traceability purpose. Under the parallel work with IEC, we will also contact the technical bodies to be aware, you know, if they have the Annex ZZ and the Annex ZA for the relevant processes. In line with the current process, the inquiry will continue. So, you know, you are aware that, you know, whenever we receive a document, there is the editing time, there is the translation process, and then there is the request for the as assessment, and only later on the inquiry will start. So this process will not be changed. In terms of follow-up actions, we'll come back later to this point. Then we get into maybe the most complex part of the current process, which is the submission of documents to formal vote. As you may be aware, under the work not in parallel, at the moment we request as assessment prior to the start the formal vote. And if there is a lack of compliance, we cannot start the formal vote itself. Now, of course, we are in a different situation. And in this case, we have several options that we tried to highlight in the slides. So the first option is, of course, on the hands of the technical bodies. You can decide not to submit the document to CCMC, and of course, in that case, we don't start any process. In case you do that, and this has already happened, there have been documents that have been submitted to CCMC. There is one question that we would like to ask you, and we will ask on a case-by-case basis. Of course, when you provide the document to us from now on, you can already inform us. So if you are willing to start the formal vote either way, we will do. This is option one. So, and in that case, we will edit the document, request the translation, and when the planned moment to start the formal vote is there, we will start the formal vote. As I informed before, we will upload the document in the AS platform so that we keep the traceability of all those cases that were supposed to receive an AS assessment. As I said, in this case, when the translation finalized, we will start the formal vote. Later on, we will come back to this point on how we monitor those cases. But of course, during this process, as Nuno informed, we will identify the cases that are at formal vote, and we will inform the Commission to understand whether there will be a possibility to receive any feedback for those documents. Then we have a second option, in a way, with sub options, which is the TC doesn't want to start the formal vote until AS assessment is there. Of course, we still have the possibility to edit the document, and I know I'm already going in a few details. So, but if the TC doesn't want to start the document to be edited, so we will return the document to the TC, and in a way, the TC could eventually even rework the document. There is a second option, which is the option second to be, where in this case we will start the normal work. We edit the document, we will request the translation, and then we put the document on hold. And then when the system is reestablished, we will pick up those documents, and we will eventually upload on that. Well, we will upload the documents on the AS platform, but in the future we could also re-ask the AS assessment. In between, for those documents, we will also inform the Commission that we have those documents, and if the Commission returns to CCMC, we can take ad hoc decisions whether we could move on or not. Then we enter into the parallel work. So as you may be aware, if you are working in the framework of the Frankfurt Agreement, as it is today, we don't stop the parallel work. So the FTs will start. If there is a case where we would have to ask an AS platform, we will do that, and we'll request, we'll upload the document in the AS platform to have the traceability that this document was supposed to receive an AS assessment. For the parallel work with ISO, the situation is slightly different, because ISO has aligned the process for the formal vote with CEN. So basically, we only start the formal vote after receiving the outcome of the assessment. And in a way, in the same situation as for the work prepared at European level, we will ask ISO, and of course this is in line with the leadership of the technical bodies, both in ISO and both in CEN, whether they want to start the FTs or the formal vote. And then if this is happening, we will again, upload the document in the AS platform to keep the traceability. The other option is, of course, to wait for the AS assessment and to not start the process. There are other options, of course, in terms of decoupling from the Vienna agreement, removing links to legislation and so on, but those are supposed to be taken, more on ad hoc basis. Then we move into the finalization steps. As you may be aware, at the moment we have this possibility to have an assessment after the formal vote or the FTs, and prior to the publication. At the moment, these assessments are also not allowed. So, if you provide us a request for an after formal vote assessment, we will have to inform you that we will not be allowed to proceed this request. So, in a nutshell, what I tried to do was to say what we can do now. Now, of course, and some of the questions were in that sense, is how are we going to deal with this later on? First of all, in terms of first working drafts and inquiry assessments, the main question, we will highlight the cases that were in the situation. We will contact the technical bodies, and the main question is, do we still need to have the assessment? And if we need, then of course this will be re-asked. Formal vote and FDs, we will systematically follow up those, of course, in contact with the technical bodies, because there could be cases where we start a formal vote and we had a prior lack of compliance assessment, and in that case, we could have at our hands, enough information to move on. And of course, CCMC will be, keeping the records and having all the data related to those documents, and will be in contact with the relevant technical bodies to ensure that an appropriate follow-up is handled. I would like to highlight that, of course, as you can imagine, we are in an unforeseen situation, and it's possible that the process will take a little bit more time. We are in a phase where there could be confusion, in terms of documents that are supposed to be assessed or not. So it's important that we are careful in this process, and we need to be patient in the next actions. If we move on now, in terms of once the system is restored, the technical bodies for the first working draft, or the CD document for the parallel work, if the time frame still allows this possibility, then they can request the first working draft assessment. So this is important for you to be aware that then you could be able to re-upload or to request a new assessment for a first working draft. So this is clear that in this case you could take the initiative to request this new assessment. In terms of the inquiry, DIS or CDV, which are ongoing or are closed, once the system is restored, we will of course support in the identification of those cases. The technical bodies should, in principle, be aware as well which were the cases that didn't receive an as assessment, and the main request is to have an assessment whether we still need the as assessment for the inquiry, or we can move on into the next steps. I think it's also important for you to be aware and to take into consideration that, as Nuno explained, we have been working with our system for a few years. Of course, there has been some disruption in the last couple of months, but we are starting to have some knowledge of what are the main issues, what are the main challenges that we encounter during the development of the standards. Most of the technical committees have been able to develop documents through the whole process and to have standards cited. So there should be enough knowledge in the system to also start knowing how to move on in the process. Then we go to the formal vote, which is, as I referred before, maybe the most challenging element or the process that we have at our hands. For the formal vote, FTs ongoing or which we have closed in between, once the system is restored. And of course, this has to be done before the publication. So there are two main options in a way. One is to move on to publication. We decided in a way to also to start a formal vote, so we could decide to go on to publication. There is a further option, of course, which is eventually to request an as assessment for that step, for that formal vote. And this, of course, will have to be done. In some cases, it could still be requested during the formal vote. In some cases, this will happen already after the closure of the formal vote. So for option one, it also to be crystal clear, if we decide option one, we move on to publication. There is no further as assessment. And then, the document is published, and you still have the possibility to decide, whether we are going to offer this document for citation, whether we are not offering for citation. And, some of the technical bodies will be aware already of the ongoing processes and, what are the ways to move into that direction. Option two is of course, it gives a little bit more options in terms of decision. So of course, if we ask an assessment and we have a positive assessment, we could move on. publish and offer the document. If we have a negative assessment or a lack of compliance assessment, then we have a series of options at our hands. And of course, then it will depend, you know, if we are talking about pure European work, if you are talking about parallel work in the framework of the ISO and CENELEC agreement, or CENELEC and IC Frankfurt agreement. And, you know, it could be about having a second formal vote, you know, just revising the Annex Z if it's just decisions related to the Annex Z. It can also be that you may decide to remove the link to the legislation, you know, to abandon the work item or to decouple from the parallel work. You know, there are several options at our ends, and of course, those need to be, you know, taken depending on the situation of each individual case. Now, I've concluded the part related, you know, how we deal with the relevant process and what we should do, and there is now a final part related to the new assessment contract, and Nuno will guide you through with the main changes and, you know, what are the modifications for the upcoming contract.
Thank you, Gonçalo. Can you just confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. So this part of the presentation, which is the final part, is to give you an update on the new contract, and I will start from the beginning. So the European Commission launched a call for tenders for the new contract on the 27th of December, and if you follow those, if you follow the links here on the slide, you can download the new tender specification, but also all the related documents. The deadline for the submission of the tenders was the 31st of January. So right now, the European Commission is assessing all those tenders received. They will make a choice within the next weeks to decide who is going to be the next HAS contractor. So at this stage, we don't really know who is going to be the new contractor or the contractor. We don't know if Ernst & Young applied. We don't know if any other organization applied. So this is still confidential. However, if Ernst & Young applied and if it's selected by the European Commission, then obviously the transition between the current contract and the future contract will be done very smoothly. And the rehiring of the HAS consultants can be done very quickly as well. If it's another contractor hired, this means that there could be some delays in the transition between the current contract and the future contract. So we need to wait and see. It is possible that, that's my opinion, that most of the consultants will be rehired, but there could be as well a call for some consultants to be hired. As I just explained, the starting of the new contract will take place between the 1st of April and the 15th of May. And these, again, are the theoretical dates that are included in the new tender specification. In terms of HAS budget, the new contract will have a budget allocation of 10.8 million euro. And this means an increase of approximately 2 million euro compared to the current contract. And this is good news. There will be more money. So this translates into more assessments and more exchanges with or exchanges between the consultants and the TCs to solve lack of compliance assessments. On the next slides, I will do some sort of a short analysis between the current contract and the new tender specification for the new contract. And if you see text in yellow, it means that it's something new compared to the current contract. On the right side, you can see on this slide the tasks and duties of the contractor within the current contract. The task 1 is about administrative and logistical tasks with regards to the HAS consultants, for example, the recruitment, but also for the allocation of the work orders. Task 2 is on horizontal verifications and checks of non-technical nature of those draft harmonized standards to be assessed by the consultant. And the task 3 is on the evaluation of the assessment results and the effectiveness of the assessment concept. So in other words, it means some tasks for some quality control after the consultant performs the assessment. Looking at, on the left side, the new tender specification, you can see that for task 1 and task 2, there has been an increase in person days for the period of 2 years. Task 3 remains the same with no change. And there is a new task, which is task 4, included in the new tender specification, which will be applied in the new contract, which is a task to provide training to TCs and the European Commission to explain how the system works. Today, within the current contract, the HAS consultants cannot participate in horizontal or sectoral training provided by CEN and CENELEC. And this task 4 is included for this precise reason of allowing the consultants to participate in some training to TCs or also to the Commission to explain how the system works. Again, this is an improvement. It's a positive aspect of the upcoming new contract. On this slide, you can see the tasks of the HAS consultants. On the right side, you see the current contract, and the consultant has 2 tasks. The main task of the HAS consultant is obviously to assess standards to see whether they are compliant with EU legislation and the standardization request. And 80% of the time of the consultants should be allocated to assessing standards, and 20% of the time of the consultant should be allocated to communication tasks. So exchanges and with the TCs, meetings with the TCs to solve lack of compliant assessments. With the new tender specification, you can see that the communication task has increased from 20% to 25%. So I'm not sure if this is sufficient, but definitely based also on feedback we received from TCs, this is definitely an improvement because it means that there will be more possibility for meetings with the HAS consultants. On this slide, you can see the outcome of assessments. Looking at the current contract, there are 2 possible outcomes. One is compliant, and then obviously it means that in the opinion of the consultant, a standard can be cited in the official journal. Lack of compliance, it means that in the opinion of the consultant, the standard cannot be cited in the official journal. And at the beginning of the current contract, there was also the possibility to have partial compliance, but because there were some doubts whenever standards received partial compliance, if there is a need to make some changes in the standard or not, the Commission and the HAS contractor decided to remove partial compliance as a possibility from the HAS assessment report. Looking at the new tender specification, compliant and lack of compliant outcomes will still be there, and there is a new possible outcome in the new tender specification, which is the possibility to give a conditional compliance. And the HAS consultant should use this conditional compliance when basically the standard is compliant with EU legislation and with the standardization request. And the only issue preventing giving a positive assessment, a compliant assessment, is the fact that the harmonized standard includes some draft normative references, draft documents as normative references that are being developed exactly at the same time and at the same stage as harmonized standards. This is particularly important when we are talking about a series of standards, of harmonized standards that are being cross-referenced to each other, or even in those cases that the normative reference is being revised at the same time as the harmonized standard. So again, some positive aspects that will be included in the new contract. In terms of assessments of standards, on the right side, you can see that in the current contract, there are each project can have a maximum of 4 assessments during the lifetime of the work item. The first one is at drafting stage. This is optional, but very much recommended. It is very important to receive the comments from the HAS consultant as early as possible in the development of the standard, and this will also increase the chances of receiving a compliant assessment at formal vote stage later on. The second assessment is at inquiry, the third at formal vote stage, and the fourth assessment can take place on exceptional cases in case the formal vote assessment is lack of compliance. So this fourth assessment can take place after the formal vote stage and should be an exceptional assessment, for example, to ensure that the Annex Z was correctly drafted. The intention of this fourth assessment should not be to look at the main aspects in the text of the standard. So overall, within the current contract, we have this one assessment per stage rule. With the new tender specification, each project can also only have a maximum of 4 assessments during the lifetime of the project. The first one is at drafting stage, the second one at inquiry stage, the third one at formal vote stage. So this is exactly the same as in the current contract. However, the 4th assessment can take place either as a second assessment at formal vote stage or after the formal vote, but before publication. This last flexible assessment can only take place if the formal vote assessment is lack of compliance and should be considered as a sort of feedback mechanism to ensure that the comments from the HAS consultant from the previous formal vote assessment have been sufficiently addressed in the standard. So the technical committee can choose, depending on the needs, whether the TC wants to have a second assessment before the launch of the formal vote or after the formal vote. What is important is to note that if the standard is published, we cannot request any more HAS assessments. And this is happening on some exceptional cases within the current contract. And there is another element, which is the European Commission. When the Commission is assessing the standards for citation, they may request the HAS consultant to perform an assessment, but this assessment report will only be available for the European Commission to assess them in their choice of citation or not of that harmonized standard. So in the next slides, you can see just a visual representation for better understanding of the different stages where the assessments can take place. This is option 1. So this is exactly what we have today. So there is one assessment per stage. In case the formal vote assessment is lack of compliance, the TC could decide within the new contract to have the 4th assessment after the formal vote stage. So this is exactly what we have today. This is option 1. Option 2, there are 3 assessments. In case the formal vote HAS assessment is lack of compliance, the TC can decide to have the 4th assessment before the launch of the formal vote. So it will be 2 assessments at formal vote stage. What is important is to say that once there is a formal vote lack of compliance, there is a new stage age created, which is a stage to allow the technical committee to revise the standard, to integrate the comments from the HAS consultant. Stage age is important as well for meetings with the HAS consultants to ensure that the comments were sufficiently addressed, to ensure that some comments are clarified, and then when the TC is ready, can submit the document to CCMC, and then CCMC would request a second assessment at formal vote stage before the launch of the formal vote. What is important is to note that in case you use the 4th assessment before the launch of the formal vote, this means that you can no longer request an assessment after the formal vote stage. And in case this second assessment at formal vote stage, the 4th assessment is lack of compliance, the TC will have to see what are the options on the table on the way forward. And the options can range from make some minor changes in the text and then proceed to formal vote, make some major changes in the text and proceed to formal vote. In some other cases, that maybe the option would be just to remove the link to legislation or to abandon the work item. So these are more extreme cases that it could also take place. So this has to be an assessment of the technical committee in case the 4th assessment is really lack of compliance. And to conclude the slides, you can see some conclusions, some key learning points. This is what I want you to remember after you leave this webinar. So the first one is that within the current HAS contract, we do not have more money, and this means that we can no longer request HAS assessments. In any case, the current contract is expiring, is ending at the end of this month. We are now in between contracts. So this means that TCs can always decide not to submit any document to CCMC for inquiry and formal vote. And as I already replied in the chat for some questions, there is some sort of flexibility, so the work items are not deleted in case you decided not to submit the text to CCMC because you wish to wait for the new contract to be in place. So the technical bodies really need to decide. In case TC submits a document to CCMC for formal vote, we will get back to you just to ensure that you really want to continue to formal vote procedures, or if you want to wait for the HAS assessment. As I explained earlier, we have as an interim solution an agreement with the European Commission that the desk officers might assess some standards. As I said, maybe this will work for some sectors. I don't think it will work for all the sectors, but we need to try. And if the Commission agrees to perform such an assessment, CCMC project manager will follow up with the technical committee to ask to complete this Commission checklist. And this will help the Commission in doing their sort of assessment of those standards. The new HAS contract is expected to be signed somewhere between the 1st of April and the 15th of May. I hope there will be no delays. We need to wait and see. I believe the new HAS contract will be better than the current contract. There will be more money, so this means more money for assessments and for meetings with the TCs. There is also a new kind of outcome included as a possibility, which is conditional compliance, that should be used only for this specific purpose of using normative references as draft documents, so only for this purpose. And there is this fourth assessment being introduced as a flexible assessment in case of receiving a negative assessment at the formal vote stage. And this should be considered some sort of a feedback mechanism, so the TCs can ensure that the comments of the consultants have been sufficiently addressed in the standard. Once the new HAS system is restored, this means that there will be there might be a big backlog of assessments to which normally would have received an assessment, a number of standards that normally should have received an assessment, both at inquiry and formal vote stage. So what is important is that with the support of CCMC, that you follow up those assessments and see if there is a need to request the assessments again for that same stage, or if it does not make sense anymore because the standard has moved from one standardization stage to, from one stage of the standardization process to another stage of the standardization process. So I can see there are a lot of questions in the chat. This was it in terms of slides, at least. And Gonçalo, I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at some of the questions.
Yes, Nuno, I've been trying to reply as much as I could. There are a few, I think, in terms of the timing of the new contract, but the timing and the duration, but I think you covered that part.
So, yeah, so the timing will be somewhere between the 1st of April and the 15th of May, and we don't know when it can really take place. So there is a question, I'm scrolling quickly through some questions. There is a question from Matteo. In case of negative assessment at formal vote, is the option of second formal vote still available so that TC can decide whether either for it or the less flexible assessment? So the thing is, for homegrown harmonized standards for CEN and CENELEC, or EN ISO harmonized standards, in case there is a negative assessment at formal vote stage, what happens is that the formal vote is suspended, is not launched, to give the opportunity to the TC to revise the document, to integrate the comments of the HAS consultants, the ones that are relevant, and then the TC can decide, after revising the standard, to have a second assessment before the launch of the formal vote. So this is one of the options. Another option is the TC decides to launch there is a lack of compliance assessment. The TC decides to launch the formal vote, and then during the formal vote or after the formal vote, you request another assessment, and then in case of a lack of compliance assessment of that final assessment, there is a chance to have a second formal vote. But remember that for that, you need BT approval. So there is a question from Marcus, which is about if we can ask for contacting the HAS consultants within the new contract to clarify the lack of compliance we received for the whole contract. I would say that you should try to do that. So in case you received a lack of compliance assessment at inquiry stage, you can request Ernst & Young for a meeting with the consultant to discuss that assessment. In principle, if most of the consultants are rehired, it means that the same consultant will be normally allocated to a meeting with a TC. The problem is when or if the consultant is not rehired, and in this case, we need to see with Ernst & Young whether a new consultant would be allocated to discuss the comments of that assessment, or if there would be no possibility, and Ernst & Young would invite you to discuss with the consultant in the frame of a new assessment.
Nuno, I also see there are a few questions in the chat related to the time frame. So, especially when we are under standardization request. So, of course, as you all know, in terms of the standardization request, they may have deadlines. I would say that the Commission is aware of the possible impacts on some of those projects, and I would say that the alternative we have at the moment is that, you know, we need to follow the necessary steps to update the deadlines in the standardization request, which will imply, of course, an update of the annexes of the standardization request. So our advice is, you know, if you have issues with the time frame, contact the PM of your TC to follow up on this better. And also maybe related to this in terms of the time frames with the project itself. This is something that has been discussed at the level of the technical boards. For the time being, we'll have some flexibility related to the technical management of the projects. And of course, what is important for you to be aware is that today you have options. You know, you have the 9-month tolerance, you have the one change option. So you can indeed also on your side take necessary decisions to adapt the time frame for your project.
Gonçalo, I can answer some questions from Laura. There is a question about the duration of the new contract. I'm sorry, this is something I should have said. So the contract will have a duration of, the new contract will have a duration of 4 years. So after 2 years, the contract can be renewed again for another 2 years. So the maximum duration of the new contract will be 4 years, which is the same as the current contract. Then there is a question from Nicole Lenz. In case of positive formal vote, the TC could ask CCMC to publish the standards as long as the new contract is not operational. So Nicole, this will be a technical choice of the TC. In case the formal vote is positive, you need to really assess all the options that you have on the table, whether you think there is a chance to have that standard cited in the official journal. Other possibilities would be to publish without the link to legislation. So this is yes, there is always the possibility that the TCs decide to publish the standard, and then we see what happens. Then there is a comment from Anmin, which is very CPR related. One of the reasons for a negative assessment is the lack of answer to the mandate. We have prepared a new one sent by CEN in August 2021, but we still not have an answer how to proceed. Well, the situation with CPR is extremely complicated, so I don't have a straightforward answer to you. It is important to have the blessing of the European Commission on those TC answers to the mandate. Without a confirmation from the Commission on whether the mandate can be accepted or not, it is very difficult then to proceed. So my suggestion is still to wait, and we will follow up with the European Commission to see whether this situation with the mandates can be solved or not, because we know that they have asked the legal services whether the validity of the mandates are still applicable or not. So this is something that we will keep you informed once we have further information.
So, Nuno, I also have here some related with the current. So there was a question related whether meetings with us consultants are possible. Definitely not. At the moment, there is no valid. Well, the contract is still valid, closing end of March, but of course the budget is run out. So the only possibility will come with a new contract.
There is a question from Pierre Monfils that is not clear. What's the process for first working draft assessment? So in short, you should not request at this stage first working draft assessments in the period between contracts. However, and the advice is for you to continue the technical work. However, when the new contract is in place, if you still are in a stage before the inquiry, you could always request a first working draft HAS assessment. So this is the advice that we would give to the TCs.
So, Nuno, I also see here there is a question related how to move on with formal votes at the moment. I see here the question from Clara Engesser. So if the standard track formal vote is chosen and the leadership decide to offer the standard formalization to DC, what are the steps needed? And also the question about the self-assessment from the TC and how well this will work. So I think we have two possibilities. One is, as Nuno highlighted during the slides, we will, in specific cases, contact the European Commission to understand whether they are in a position to provide us an assessment of the standard. And in case it will happen, then you will be contacted to provide some supporting information and including the checklist from the European Commission. If we don't receive any feedback, of course, and you will be contacted in this case, if the formal vote closes and if the formal vote is positive, we'll be contacted how you want to move on. And as we try to guide you through, there is always the possibility. Of course, in the previous, I would say, framework of our rules, we would have to have a compliant assessment or an assessment that has been resolved in order to go through publication. I would say that now we are under exceptional rules, and of course, if the technical body will decide to move on with the process, I think we have no other choice to move on. And of course, we will try to justify to the Commission if we offer the standard, why the standard has been offered. And of course, we have to keep in mind that most of the cases, the documents under finalization at the moment will have had an as assessment during the process. So I think this is also something to be taken into account.
There is a question from Andrea Legnani. When we will know who is the official HAS contractor? Well, I think we will only know when the contract is signed. I don't think we will know before that. So we need to wait and see. There is a comment or a question from Didri Furi. If possible, it would be useful to have the answers to these questions shared. And this is something that always after the webinar, we will answer all the questions and we will make the report available, of course.
Nuno, I see that there are also quite a few questions related to the conditional compliance. Maybe you could come back to this point. So the current framework is that conditional compliance is to be applicable for undated normative references. You can confirm that.
Yeah, exactly. So the conditional compliance can only be used for one purpose. So if the standard has many issues, for example, issues with the Annex Z and issues with draft normative references included in the text, the consultant will not give a conditional compliance. The consultant will give a lack of compliance. The use of conditional compliance is only for those specific cases where everything is okay with the harmonized standard from a compliance point of view with the EU legislation or with the standardization request. But the only issue preventing giving a positive assessment is because the standard includes some normative references that are being developed. They are PRENs or FPRENs. There are, for example, some standardization requests, recent standardization requests that includes a long list of standards to be developed at the same time with the same deadline for their adoption, and they need to be cross-referencing each other. So in those cases, the TCs should not be penalized with a lack of compliance. So it's really only for the purpose of the inclusion of PRENs and FPRENs that are being developed at the same time, at the same stage as the harmonized standard. I hope this answered the question.
So we still have a few minutes, Nuno, so maybe we can still go through some of the questions.
Yes, there is a question from Enrico Maria Fumagalli. What about the lack of compliance for more than one EU directives, regulations? Is the process valid for all of them? Yes, I would say that yes, it is. Of course, when a standard is under multiple directives, the situation becomes a little bit more complex because you need to reach compliance with multiple regulations. I would say that in the interim solution, we would need to contact 2 desk officers or 3 desk officers for LVD, EMC, in order to see whether they would perform an assessment. And the same situation would apply that for the same standard for both directives, could also wait for the new contract to be in place to request an assessment. One of the possibilities would be, for instance, just to harmonize for one regulation and not for the other one. But again, this is a mere choice of the technical committee, but I confirm that it's applicable for both of them. Okay.
Nuno, I think there are also a few questions related to the future contracting. You know, what are the impacts related to resources? I think you highlighted some points. From our side, it is our understanding that the Commission tried to assess, you know, the volume of the different pieces of legislation. They also tried to assess whether there was a potential evolution of the legislation in the future. So those aspects have been taken into account. Of course, we cannot say more than this because this is a responsibility from the Commission side. So, but I think from the information we got, this has been taken into account, and also, you know, in some sectors like CPR, this has also reflected the lack of progress related to the legislative situation and the lack of standardization requests and so on. I don't know if there is any additional point you may want to include on this matter.
No, I just would like to answer to this question from Michael. Does the period of time allocated to an AS consultant for an assessment remain 6 weeks within the new contract? And the answer is yes. So this has not changed, which means that the HAS contractor will have 35 days to deliver the HAS assessment reports to CCMC. There was something I wanted to answer.
Yeah, there is also one related, Nuno, here I see one from Pierre Wolfis related to the 5 weeks and whether there will be an impact on the backlog. I would say with our experiences, it is indeed possible that in the first months of the contract, there may be a delay, especially if we systematically re-ask all the assessments that were pending. There is a risk that there will be some delays in the process. So that's clear.
Exactly. There could be a big volume of standards being submitted to Ernst & Young, to the new contractor. That's more correct.
Yes.
To see, and it's possible that there are some delays. There is a question that I would like to answer because before we close the webinar, which I think it's very important, which is from Nicole. Nicole Lenz. I suppose that when the HAS assessments will be introduced, it will be done on the basis of a stable checklist from the Commission. Has the Commission confirmed that the checklist and the conformity with this checklist will lead to citation? So what is important to clarify for me is that this use of the Commission checklist is only in between contracts. So this is something that the Commission considers necessary for helping those desk officers that may agree to assess those standards. In fact, what all the TCs will have to do is to use the CENELEC checklist that was agreed by the technical boards that go a little bit more beyond the Commission checklist. And this checklist is important to be filled when submitting a document to CCMC for inquiry and formal vote. stage. So because it's a sort of a reminder on the elements that you need to consider. So I would say that once the new system is in place, you need to focus on the CEN and CENELEC checklist and not on the Commission checklist. It's good that you know them, and it's good that you take a look at them. Also, like with the HAS assessment report, to understand what kind of aspects they look at. But I would say that it's more important to use the CEN and CENELEC checklist. And the checklist of the Commission was circulated to the TC chairs and secretaries when we were informing about these gap between contracts. But we can circulate again if the checklist of the Commission is not available for you. Else, it's 11 o'clock. I would suggest, if you agree, that we close the webinar, and then we will reply to the remaining questions later on, and then we circulate the report and we publish it on the website.
Yes, exactly. I suggest to do that as well. I just would like to remind the audience that we have a post-webinar survey as well. So we would appreciate that everybody who is here today replies to the few questions that we have in the survey. So we have some feedback on this webinar. So thank you very much, Nuno and Gonzalo. I think it was very interesting and many challenges ahead. So please keep up the good work, and we'll see you maybe next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your participation.
Yeah, bye-bye. Have a nice day.